So one of the 10 plagues was the plague of the Sardea, the frogs.
Are you on? Oh yeah.
And this
Generations will be saying that.
Some opinions say it was like the Egyptian crocodile. That would be a lot more scary than some regular frogs. I wouldn't want frogs jumping around my house either, but crocodiles would be a different madrega. So there's an interesting Gemara in Psachim that the Gemara deduces an interesting halacha from. That we know there's a mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem. There's a mitzvah in the Torah that under certain situations one has a mitzvah to give up their life to sanctify their name for Hashem. Normally it's v'chai bahem, v'lo yamus bahem. Usually we go with the principle Judaism is a religion of life, not death, and therefore you have to violate the mitzvah. If someone is seriously ill on Shabbos, so you desecrate the Shabbos. Someone's stuck on a desert island, you eat treif. Whatever the case may be, your life takes precedence. But there are 3 exceptions to the rule. The big 3, as they're known, the 3 cardinal sins. If someone puts a gun to you and says, commit adultery, avodah zarah, idol worship, or murder someone else. So we say there's a mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem. Doesn't mean if someone under duress can't resist the temptation, if someone puts a gun to you and you violate one, it's not like it isn't like you violated arayis. You're probably an onus. You're not, but you don't get. You might not get punished for that act, but you are mevatel a mitzvah aseh of Kiddush Hashem.
You don't have the shame of Ratzeach?
Exactly. I mean, assuming you are really under duress. The halacha is you can't do it. You have a mitzvah, but if you do, it doesn't mean you're a murderer. Because obviously we know in general, when you do something under duress, you're not responsible. Like the Gemara tells us in Peiches on Shabbos that Yitzatzu v'tach Sahara, we're going to be reading it in a couple of weeks in PARSHA Yisro, that it says the Jews were sitting by the mountain, but the Gemara learns out that God tilted the mountain over their head by Har Sinai, that if you accept the Torah, good. If not, here will be your burial. It's also good. So they made the right choice. We're still here. So the Gemara asks, what do you mean? Bikan moda rabba daraisa. If that's the case, the whole acceptance to the Torah isn't binding, because if someone puts a gun to my head and says, make me make a commitment, of course I'm going to say yes, and of course I'm not going to do it after the gun's away from my head. So the Gemara has to come, the Rishonim come up with reasons why it's still binding. But the rule is, if you do something, if you're an honest, and that was the whole discussion we had a couple of weeks ago about the Beis HaLevi, whether you should call a Shomer Shabbos doctor or a non-Shomer Shabbos doctor in terms of a Shabbos emergency. How do you define onus? You might have a discussion how you define duress, but whatever duress, if someone does something under duress, you're going for a Shabbos emergency, so obviously you're not desecrating the Shabbos. You're driving to the hospital to save someone, or you see someone on the road, whatever the case may be. So we know normally you have a mitzvah v'chai bahem. The big 3, you have a mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem. Of course, if you violate, it doesn't mean you're an idol, you're an avodah zarah, you're an adulterer or a rotzeach. It's something you shouldn't have done, but perhaps it's definitely not the same liability as if you just decided to volunteer it out of nowhere. So it's interesting. So we learn out from the pasuk the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem. So it's interesting when the Gemara in Psachim asks, "Ma ra'u Chananya Zachayu Malachi?" What did Chananya? Those are the people who did the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem. In contrast to Daniel, who ran away. So what did they see? Why did they commit Kiddush Hashem? Why did they jump into the Kivshana Eish, the fiery furnace, and give up their lives? So the Gemara says they learned it out from the frogs. They learned it out from our frogs. Well, I thought you learned how to jump from frogs and other things. They took it to the next step. The pasuk says, where did the frogs go? The frogs said they were all over. So they point out that they went tanu recha. Some went into the ovens. Others went into the bishar rotecha. They went into the dough. Others went into the bedrooms. Others went into the bathroom. The frogs were all over every room. So, what do you mean they went tanu recha? They went into the ovens. Obviously, those who went, and I guess the assumption being the ovens were on at the time.
You'd have roast frog.
And actually you have, so those frogs obviously died, so they learned out. Just like the frogs didn't have to go into the ovens, they could have went into the cake, they could have went into the bedroom, they could have went into the living room, they could have went in front of the new 110-inch TV from Samsung, wherever they wanted to go. It's only 150 grand. Don't worry, Jeff, it will come down. You could get it for 100, I think, and if you wait a couple of months. So they could have been watching the game. Instead, they chose to go into the hot ovens. So we see from here that, so this like Hananiah, Mishael, so they said this like, we see they gave up their lives, so too we learned. That's the Gemara. So the question is very difficult. Why do they have to learn from a story, a pasuk about the frogs? They say they learned it from the mitzvah of the Nikdashti B'soch B'nei Yisrael. We have a mitzvah in PARSHA Zemor, the mitzvah of going Kiddush Hashem. Why learn it out? They might have got the result right, but why did they learn it from the wrong source? Why quote a difficult Agadic passage about frogs when they could have quoted the pasuk in the Chumash, like the source of Kiddush Hashem? So that's a whole discussion between the Ri and Rabbeinu Tam about what exactly did they do. So Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, what did they do? What were they forced to do? Nebuchadnezzar, who was the king of Babel and who ruled the world at some point, they made a big image of him, and they were going to force them to bow down to it. So the question is, what was the status of that image? In other words, there's a general machlokes, the Tosfos and the Rambam, in a situation where I don't have to go al Kiddush Hashem. Am I allowed to? In other words, obviously, the case of Kiddush Hashem, when you're forced, you have no choice, and it's the big three, so there's a mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem. What about a case where I don't have to? Let's say, for instance, let's say I'm very meticulous in kashrus, and the Gentile knows that. So if the Gentile is hungry and he's forcing me to Mechal Shabbos because he wants me to barbecue, he doesn't care about that it's Shabbos, he doesn't care religion. So of course everyone would say then obviously you go ahead. It's nothing to do with Ma'avir al Adas. He's not doing it to go against my religion. He's doing it because he's hungry. He wants some good beef back ribs, whatever he wants, or he makes you make some pork chops, whatever it may be. So then, and he makes sure you have to taste them because they have to be just right before he'll kill you if they're not good. So whatever the reason are, if he's doing it for his own benefit, so then there's no mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem. On the big three, there's a mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem. On everything else, let's say he's doing it because, so that's a discussion.
Oh, yes.
So let's say a person, he says, I want you to Machalo Shabbos.
Yes.
And a person says, oh, I just can't bring myself to do it. I'm not. So are you allowed to not Machalo? We know it's for the 610 B'chai Bahem, the other three no. Do you have an option? Can I not Machalo Shabbos and be killed? So Tosfos says yes. Tosfos is right. You never have to violate a mitzvah. You're not obligated to, clearly, like for the big three you have to, but for the 610 other ones, I never have to violate, and if he forces me to eat treif, I don't have to eat, and one has an option to go al Kiddush Hashem under other situations. What the details of when you can, when you can't, that's a separate share, but if the kuda is, whether it's a situation where you don't have to, where you're allowed to Machal Shabbos, I'm allowed to eat treif, and I still don't, am I allowed to do it? The Tosfos says yes, and the Rambam says no, Arezen is chayev benafsho. There's a prohibition in Torah called suicide. You are committing suicide by being Mechal Shabbos when you don't have to, by not eating treif when you could save your life. You are prohibited. You have to. So it's a Machokas Tosfos in the Rambam in general. In a situation where you don't have to, can I optionally choose to? Yeah, Jeff.
Suppose you have a wicked anti-Semitic king who wants to humiliate the Jews by forcing them to eat pork in public. Now, does that raise it to a new level?
So there's different details I'm not going into now, but there's Shas HaShMOT. There's a time.
Yes.
So we have that everyone agrees to during a time of religious persecution. Afilu al mitzvah kala. even on a simple, perhaps the Gemara even says maybe even to switch from black to red shoelaces.
Yes.
In other words, even on a mitzvah kala, shas hashmad, if they're doing it for religious, to make a mockery of Judaism,
yes.
so then one would have a mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem also. But so we're talking about in non-shas hashmad cases, in the cases where, you have the option. So what was the case in Nebuchadnezzar? What exactly were they bowing down to? So it's a machlokas Rabbeinu Tam and the Ri. Was this real avodah zarah or not? Was this an avodah zarah? Like what was? So some Rishonim say, yeah, it was real avodah zarah. It was something that was usher to do, and therefore they chose to jump into the fiery furnace. And other Rishonim say, no, it wasn't avodah zarah. It was only what covered hamelach. Some kings are egotistic. Some presidents, some prime ministers, they like building statues for themselves. So this is the thing, it was out covered HaMelech. It wasn't that he believed he was God or anything like that. It was purely out covered HaMelech. So therefore it wasn't Avodah Zarah at all. So the kashas, so we have kashas in either direction. So according to the one who said that it was real Avodah Zarah, so then he has the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem. What do I need the frogs? And according to the one that it wasn't Avodah Zarah, why they, how are they allowed to do it or not? So no one, so it could be that this machlokes is consistent with the other. This machlokes Rambam and Tosas, whether in a situation where I don't have to go out, am I allowed to? So according to the opinion, it says it wasn't real Avodah Zarah. It was only covered. So why did they do it? Because it looked like Avodah Zarah, but it wasn't. So that's clearly working with Shitas HaTosfos, that in a situation where I don't have to give them my life, I'm allowed to. The other opinion that seems to say it was real Avodah Zarah, so then that's working with the Rambam sheet, that the only time you're allowed to, if it's real Avodah Zarah. However, so according to what do I learn out from the frogs then? This quotes the pasuk in PARSHA Amar, V'nikdashi b'soch b'nei Yisrael. So that's what the Rishonim point out. What about the following case? So we know if you're in a situation of Kiddush Hashem, one has an obligation to give up their life. Mm-hmm. That's a given. The question is, what about the following? Let's say I know whoever the Nazis, the kings, whoever are coming in, I know they're going to put me to the test and to either give up your religion or I'm going to kill you. Let's say I know it's going to happen. And let's say I know they're coming to my town tomorrow. Do I have an option? And I have an option to run away. I could leave today. If I leave today, I won't be put in that situation tomorrow. Am I mechuyev to run away now? Everyone agrees once you're in that situation tomorrow, that's it. That's the classic case of Kiddush Hashem. But okay, can I run away today, avoiding this? Or
must I run away?
Must I run away? Of course, you can run away.
Yes.
Must you run away? So that's what they learned out from the frogs. The frogs could have went into the muffins, the cookies, the cake. They could have been sitting in the den watching TV, whatever they wanted to do. They could have been on the computer. They chose to go into the ovens. Betanu recha. They chose to give up their lives. That's what Hanyana Mishav Azariah learned out from the frogs. And even though they could have ran, that was the thing. Daniel did run away. He fled. They didn't run. From the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem, they didn't learn that. That's once the situation was there, they have to go. How did they know they were allowed not to run away? That's what they deduced the Kal Vachomer from the frogs. That's what the addition of the frogs was. That they, even though in a situation where tomorrow will bring a situation of a mandatory Kiddush Hashem, am I allowed not to run away and give up my life, or must I run away? So that was in the Kudah. So therefore, according to Hanan Mishav Azariah, so according to the approach that it wasn't Avodah Zarah, so that they learned out from the frogs that I have an option not to run away and give up my life tomorrow. And according to the ones who said Avodah Zarah, so there was. They don't learn that wasn't the option. The option is they learned out. They learned out from the frogs. Even in a situation where you don't have to, because it wasn't Avodah Zarah, it's Abizrayu Avodah. So that's a discussion in the Rishonim that let's say something looks like Avodah Zarah. Let's say it's called Abizrayu. It's not just limited to Avodah Zarah, but there's Abizrayu Darayis. That's a question of the Ramban Balamor. am I obligated to give up my life in a situation where something
Looks like it.
if something, let's say something is avodah zarah right now, let's say something might lead to it or looks like it, and obviously how far, I don't mean 20 steps behind, but something which is the next step to it. So that's a further discussion in the Rishonim. Is there a mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem in a situation that if I do this, the next step it might lead me to do it, so I'm allowed to give up my life even before that? No. The halacha only applies to, that gets into a separate one. This what is Abizrayu do avodah zarah. In other words, like we have a prohibition in Torah lifnei ivir. Lifnei ivir lo sitain mikshul. You can't put a stumbling block in front of a blind person. So obviously, literally you can't. That's a given. But it means not only literally the Gemara learns out, but giving bad advice. Obviously, to put blindfold someone and put them in front of a pit and let them walk into it, that's clearly prohibited. Everyone knows that. But let's say give someone bad advice, lead them the wrong way, do something that's going to lead them. So that's also lifnei ivir. So when you violate lifnei ivir of Shabbos, let's say you cause them to mechal Shabbos, or lifnei ivir of eating treif. So what's the prohibition? Is it a Isser Kloli that it's a general, it doesn't make a difference which Aveira you lead them to, you violate Lifnei Ivir. It's a general Kloli, or as I say, no, Lifnei Ivir, it's a Lifnei Ivir Prati, that it's a form of, depending whatever you call it, is it a form of Chilul Shabbos you violate? Is it a form of eating treif?
He's my shaliach.
Yes, that's the issue in Abizrayu. So is Abizrayu a general Isser, and therefore it wouldn't be a Yarog V'al Yav, or it's nothing to do with the specific Aveira? Or no, if it's Abizrayu do Araya, so then it's a Chelok of Avodah Zarah. That's a further discussion among the Rishonim. But that's so that's what they point out. Depending, so what do we actually learn out from the frogs? Either because it wasn't Avodah Zarah, we learned out from the frogs that they had the ability to volunteer. The guys said no, it was Avodah Zarah, but the choice was they could have ran away yesterday. Just like the frogs didn't have to go in the oven, they could have ran away like Daniel and not given up the life. They learned from the frogs that even though you don't have to, you have a mitzvah to stay if you want and give up your life.